Welcome to Coffee and Contemplation. I'm Robin.
I'm Heidi.
And today, we'll be discussing Season 2, Chapter 1, Madmax. Coffee selections for today. I'm actually drinking a cup of lavender coffee from Copper Cow, which you had gotten it as a gift.
And the Copper Cow is the Vietnamese style pour over.
When I started looking into it, because I was going to get some more, I found, they have like a bunch of different kind of like latte flavors, which, because they send you the milk and sweetener with the box set that you get. And I mean, I tend to drink coffee black, but they have a couple of cool flavors like this one. They have rose, they have lavender, a couple like that. How about you? What are you drinking today?
An iced decaf Americano from our friend Bucky, Starbucks.
Well, now that we've acquired coffee, let's proceed with contemplation. Dude, this opening.
Yeah.
It says that the show is stepping up its game, so to speak. And I mean, just in this one sequence, it expands the universe beyond Hawkins, which, I mean, I know I see as a good thing. And it shows the reach of the lab in some ways. You don't fully know that on first viewing, but, you know, with all of the context of the second and third season, I've heard some people say that the reason that they resent Chapter 7 so much is because this opening is so strong and sets up a lot of expectations that were never lived up to. And while I will be taking a defensive position on that episode later, I do find this to be an unfair buildup that we never see full payoff for. I mean, and structurally speaking, it immediately sets off a dozen questions right at the top of the season and gets us on board for what's to come. I mean, we smash into this action sequence. It's on a larger scale. It's so good.
Yeah. It's really, really compelling, even though you have no idea who these people are. I mean, you know that they like just robbed a place and they're getting chased by the police, but that is all that you know. You don't know why they're robbing people. You don't know what like their intergroup relationship is like, but it's so dynamic. I mean, Kali is just badass.
And she's clearly the leader.
Yes.
She's the only one who's not like frantic and freaking out.
Yeah. Good point. I love the fake out with Kali's powers because we're used to Eleven's powers where her powers manifest physically in our world. Like, you know, she reaches out and she touches things with her mind. Whereas with Kali, you know, we see her like close her eyes and get ready and we're like, oh my God, what's happening? And then she goes boom and we see the debris come down. But then they like take their sweet time revealing to us that like nothing happened, that it was an illusion. And then that's when we see her like wiping the blood away and we see the 8. And there's so much packed into that because now we know that there were other successful experiments and that those powers manifested differently. And like, I agree with everything you said about like expanding the world, you know, and so on. I'm also a Lost Sister episode apologist, but because everything is so grounded in Hawkins throughout the rest of the season, it does make the Lost Sister and the sequence feel out of place, which is a shame because there's such good stuff there.
Well, and in a way, it's kind of like, I almost feel like them opening with the cityscape and this completely urban environment, which is very different from anything we saw last season. It's such a radical departure from what we're used to. It reminds me a little bit of kind of what I think they were also trying to do with Starcourt Mall. But I think that in a way, seasons 2 and 3, almost by being on such opposite ends of that spectrum, I think they both don't fully succeed, but for the opposite reason. I think in the case of The Lost Sister, they don't spend enough time in that different environment. And I think, and I know I probably shouldn't be talking about it at this point, but I kind of think it's relevant because I think it frames a little bit of like how we're approaching both of these seasons in a lot of ways. Season 3 doesn't, like, it spends too much time leaning into that. It leans into it too much, and this one doesn't lean into it enough. And so they didn't quite, between the two seasons, I don't think they quite found the right balance of, like, changing things up quite enough. But, you know, we talked last season about how the series repeatedly picked up where it left off between intervals, and this is a really hard left turn from that. I mean, aside from the fact that Madmax opens just shy of a year after the final moments of the Upside Down in season 1, and yeah, the slow reveal of that, like, you know, her pulling her arm up to wipe the nosebleed. It's such a powerful start.
And also, I grew up not in Pittsburgh City, but you know, in the Pittsburgh area. So like that first scene, like even before they like have, you know, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania come up on the screen, I was like, that looks like Pittsburgh. Ah, you know, I was so excited. And so I'm always pumped anytime something Pittsburgh related comes up in a positive or exciting way.
And as you know, and then we move into the title sequence and you're kind of like, okay, this is Stranger Things, right? Yes, cool. Okay. And as we move into that title sequence, we see new names in the credits. Sadie Sink, Joe Keery, Dacre Montgomery, and Paul Reiser are all series regulars, or at least they're in the title sequence for this episode anyway. And coming out of that, we then go back to exactly in a way it almost this opening kind of reminded me a little bit of Toy Story 2. Actually, because Toy Story 2 opens with the video game, the Buzz Lightyear video game, but you're experiencing it as though you're really with Buzz while he goes onto this alien planet. You think, oh, Toy Story, Andy's room, but it's this completely different thing. You're not expecting that. You then go into Andy's room after that, you know, hard left turn, and then you're right back in Hawkins, like with not just the place, but also the characters that you know. The kids communicating over their hall for the arcade. Mm-hmm. And we even get a reprise of the kids track from season 1, the musical track, which is a really nice, subtle way of establishing a familiar vibe, even though it's the same characters. And I want to note, too, that Dustin is already inventing. He has the headset while the rest of the kids still just have the regular walkie-talkies.
Oh, yeah, I noticed that, but I didn't put it together that he had, like, invented it.
I mean, I'm assuming.
Yeah,
there's
probably,
no textual evidence either way, but... And Mike steals from Nancy's piggy bank.
After raiding her underwear drawer. Unintentionally.
Yeah.
And looking like, ugh.
Yeah. I gotta say, you know, Nancy, you know, Natalia Dyer rocking that new haircut, 80s and all. The kids meet at the arcade, including Will, who gets dropped off by Joyce. And I so appreciate how much healthier she looks. She has more color. She looks less strained, less thin. Like she's just not quite so frayed and scared.
Mm-hmm. Both Will and Joyce are kind of like bouncing in their car seats because like they're both like trying to get out what they're trying to say, but they also know that like Will's about to like, you know, shoot off like a rocket. It's cute. On like an actual like textual analysis level, it conveys how different things are for them in their lives. Like they are both happy and healthy and together.
Well, and her concern for Will, it feels understandable, but also not too overbearing.
Right.
You know, when she says have fun, you know, I believe her.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't seem forced. It seems like she really genuinely does want him to have a good time, but she is also still, like, understandably very concerned.
Yes, yes.
And look, I know there's a lot of nostalgia around Dragon's Lair, but yikes. Oh, Princess Daphne is so cringe.
Yep, that's a lot to unpack. I had never even heard of the game, just being honest. I wanted to geek out over the animation style, and I was like, is she wearing a thong?
Yeah. She ain't wearing much, no matter what she's officially designed to be wearing. There's not much to it, whatever it is.
It's fine.
Well, apparently, too, like, I don't remember if it was in the Beyond Stranger Things show on Netflix or if it was in the book, Worlds Turned Upside Down. But I read or heard somewhere that they didn't really, the Duffers didn't really have like an excessive love of that game, but it was often one of the ones that they had to play because it was the only one that was available in their arcade. Or someone said that, it might have been Sean Levy, but it wasn't, they're like, we're aware that it wasn't like one of the best games.
Well, it was like insanely hard, wasn't it?
I have no idea.
I
didn't
thought
like
I heard.
it.
Yeah.
Was the impression I got from whatever this was that I saw or read or...
Yeah.
And it does, I know that they did say that this is sort of an indirect setup as well for sort of their words, not mine, competition over Max. The fact that they are sort of vying for her affection, which does happen for a while. And for what it's worth, I like how the show shifts away from that.
Yeah.
Eventually. And sort of on an adjacent note to that, they see the high scores have changed. They want to know who Madmax is. They ask Keith, and he wants a date with Nancy, which Mike is completely like, no.
Every time I watch that episode, I think that what the bargain is going to be is her number. I never think that like a date is what he's trying to use as a bargaining chip. I'm like, you arrogant motherfucker. Like, you think that her little brother can just give you a date with, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not like, she mad about it, but I'm like, I'm more confused than anything else.
I'm also kind of wondering, is Keith still in high school? They don't make it.
I have no idea.
Because, including season 3 and all this, he knows Robin, so it's kind of hard to tell if he's still in school or not. Like, he may just have a part-time job, but like, so it almost, I think I always had the impression, until I thought about it just now, that Keith was not even in school anymore. I think that was contributing to why I'm like, you want to date with Nancy Wheeler? She's a junior in high school, and you're not in school. Yeah. So, but that may not be true. He may be a senior like Steve, or he may even be in Nancy's grade. You know, it's hard to say, especially if he knows Robin. She's in Nancy's year.
I think this is most probably one of those things that we are not supposed to worry our pretty little heads about.
And they may not even have thought that far down the road at this point, so... But either way, I just thought it feels completely natural that Mike would be like, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Despite the pressure from his friends. Like, and I mean, and I hate the idea of it, but I love that I do kind of enjoy Lucas's line of, but it's for a good cause.
Yeah. I would have laughed a lot harder, again, if it had been like her number or something like that, or like pass a note or something, you know. But I still feel like Mike would have been like, ew, no.
And that's the point where Will wanders off, hearing something, and he has an episode, quote unquote, getting an extended flash of the Upside Down. I was actually surprised to realize that he doesn't see the mind flare here. He just sees the cloud.
Yeah.
And of course, along very similar lines, it's Mike who noticed that Will wandered off and comes out to check on him. Just being the good friend that he is, continuing that thread of empathy. I don't know. I wonder if he can tell that not all is well with Will, which is why he asks. But then when Will brushes it off, Mike doesn't pry. He doesn't press. He just, you know, leads him back into the arcade anyway. But he's aware that Will is shaken. But he's like, no, let's just normalcy. Like, yeah, that's because that's the kind of person that Mike is. Anyway.
Moving right along.
I love the establishing little mini montage of downtown Hawkins. I really do. I'm surprised every time I watch the show how much I enjoy that little piece. And which concludes as we return to the Hawkins police station and Hopper pulls up. And this was the shot that I was referring to last season when I mentioned the sentiment of wanting to stand up and cheer and go, Hopper's here.
Yeah.
And we promptly meet Murray and get a drastically quick impression that he's a conspiracy theorist and that no one in town takes him seriously, even though we also very quickly get that some of his information isn't totally wacko. I mean, he's coming up with the wrong conclusions.
Yeah.
Which is what Nancy says later.
Yeah. He's taking all of the puzzle pieces and, like, you know, turning them into an impressionist painting.
And despite how cruel it is, I actually really get a kick out of how Callahan and Powell are laughing at their own jokes at Murray's expense.
Yeah.
I mean, it's mean, but it's them, it's the actors, I think. Like, must be said, too, that Callahan makes the connection to Troy last year when Murray brings up the girl with powers.
Yeah. At some point, it would be interesting / cool to have the two of them approach Hopper and be like, yeah, remember, we've known about this the whole time, and we kind of followed your lead of like, oh, it was a prank. Do you want to actually, like, tell us what the fuck's going on now, Chief? I don't know if they will do that, but it would be cool.
It's going to be interesting, actually, to see in season 4 who's police chief.
Oh, yeah, because he's not. Yeah.
Because Hopper's not around. So it's going to be interesting to see if they've got a new person. I don't think that that's going to be the case, considering like who they've announced for the new cast, like new cast members. So I'm going to guess it's probably going to be Powell.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Hopper gives Murray
5 minutes.
5 minutes. I think the line... Yeah, I heard about that one. Did you hear about the fat man with a beard who climbs down chimneys? Might be one of my favorite lines in the whole series.
Yeah.
It's his delivery. It's Harper's delivery. Because it's like because it's at first you're not sure where, and then it's like, oh.
Yeah. I love that line so much. I actually like remember the first time I heard it. That was like right after I had moved into the new house and there was like boxes everywhere. I was feeling like, no, I should keep going. I should keep unpacking. But then it was like... It was this perfect, like, chilly October night. It was raining and cool outside. And so I was like, no, we need to watch some Stranger Things. So I was, like, curled up and, like, I had the window open just a tiny little bit so I could listen to the rain. And it was extremely atmospheric. And, like, that line just made me laugh so much. It was like, it's a really nice memory.
Yeah, that's awesome. I also really like how Hopper shifts from cavalier to dead serious in the same sentence. Because he starts out with, I liked your alien theory a lot better, and then shifts to, and stop bleeding those people dry.
Yeah.
He knows that Murray is milking the Hollands because he knows what happened to Barb.
Yeah.
And that him, even if Murray doesn't know, Hopper knows that it's a dead end. And it's only prolonging their grief. And I get the impression that Hopper believes that it's wrong, but can't step in.
Right.
So he's not remotely holding back his disgust for it. And maybe this is why I don't mind the digging at Murray's expense earlier. Because he is taking advantage of the Hollands. Even if he believes he's on a real investigation, I don't really think he cares about Barb's welfare.
I think the thing he cares about most is exposing the conspiracy. But I do think that he cares about finding out what happened to Barb. So I don't think that he's like, let me separate some suckers from their money. But I also don't think that he has any compunction taking their money to fund this greater purpose of his.
Finding out what happened to her is sort of like a fringe benefit of a mission he's already on.
Well, it's part and parcel.
Okay, that's a better way to say it, yeah.
But again, if we are just looking at the text that we have so far, it very much appears that he's just taking advantage of them. So I could see, I'm basing that this is what I think Murray's overall motivation is based on having 2 entire seasons with him at this point.
Yeah.
From what we have, I am with Hopper.
I think he's a little manic and a little obsessive is the way we're supposed to read him, but also we're supposed to, I think, be made afraid of him a little bit because no, he isn't totally off. And that's what I think Hopper, the character, I think Harper's performance is really good, but I think the way that it's written should, deserve some credit because the way it's written, Hopper has to ride this really careful line of I need you to not look into this, but I can't inform you as to that the reason why is because you're right. Yeah. Because we also have the hindsight as well of knowing that he knows exactly where 11 is. I don't want you looking into this. And also knowing that Barb is dead and that could, even just knowing that could be problematic. Yeah. And knowing that he's working with the lab in some ways to keep people off the scent as well, to keep it quiet, keep everything clean so that they can fix the mess quietly, et cetera, et cetera. So I really appreciate the way that this season is written in terms of Hopper's characterization and what his motivations are and how he's dealing with someone like Murray, as well as the other two, and with them, he has to just shut it down because they do know him. But also just go home. The way Hopper says it, I'm like, Murray looks a lot less concerned than I would be if Hopper said that to me.
Well, but the other thing that, Hopper's got to deal with is understanding that Murray is one of those personalities that really enjoys defying authority. So he can't, I almost feel like go home was a miscalculation on Hopper's part because as soon as Murray hears that, he's going to be like, no, this is where I am. This is where I'm staying. So I almost feel like he played into the dumb local cop, stereotype and undercut everything that Murray said. But that last go home line came from the real Hopper. And I'm sure that Murray picked up on that, which is not, if getting rid of Murray is our goal, is not a good thing. So yeah, there was a lot of subtext. Well,
and also, to what we said in season 1 about, clever, sneaky Hopper, here, his words are very staccato. It's like, yeah, it's more humorous, but it's still very quiet. It's still very deadpan. And I'm like, that feels very cohesive with last season. At that point, we move over to Hawkins High and Steve and Nancy in the car.
Watching the portion of the scene where they're working on Steve's essay always breaks my heart as an educator, and specifically as someone who taught writing, because I see potential in that essay. I see how he could make that connection. Yes, it's ridiculous to say that winning a basketball game is somehow akin to winning a war, but my granddad went through this difficult experience and then came back and built a life for himself, and that you can thematically connect those things. And it's very clear to me that Steve is smart and that he's got things to say that he is struggling to get out and clearly articulate on paper. But his insecurity gets the better of him and he gives up. And that really, really, really hurts my heart.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I agree with you, but I also don't at the same time, because I think that that's us interpreting more, I think, than what they... I don't think that was their intention, based on the way that the actors are directed, and also the way that it's cut together, like where the pauses are. I think because they both won. I think that is intended to make Steve look stupid, because I think they're trying to set him up that he's not on Nancy's level intellectually, which is also true.
Fair, yeah.
You know, especially since then later she talks to Jonathan about, you're going to be at home, you know, reading Vonnegut, and it's a clear juxtaposition to Jonathan. And Steve is the one who I think ends up being portrayed in an unflattering light. I remember even the first time through going, this feels a little ham-fisted to make him sound stupid. So maybe that's just me, like, not necessarily understanding the full subtext. I prefer your interpretation a lot more.
Yeah, and, you know, but it could also be that, like, my interpretation is coming from... I have been presented with a lot of really rough essays by students whom I know you have good ideas. I know you have thoughts that deserve to be stated. Let's work on this. Like, I genuinely feel that everybody deserves to have a voice. So that could be my reacting to, don't fucking tell him he's stupid. He has ideas.
Yeah.
But what I think is really interesting, since you bring that up, is thinking about, like, okay, up to now we have seen Steve as, like, he's the guy that all the girls walk away. You know what I mean?
Big
like,
man on campus.
Yeah, he's a big man on campus.
Athlete.
And then immediately after this scene where she's like, your college entrance essay sucks. You have this new guy in town, drives a sexy car and plays his music really loud.
That's
and like,
true.
And so like that further undercuts Steve. And then you have the conversation where she's like, you're going to be listening to Joy Division and reading Vonnegut and, you know,
and not participating in these dumb social
things.
Rituals.
Yeah. And then again undercut Steve. So taking away the pedestal that we have, or that the show has put Steve on, starts immediately.
I mean, I stand by what I said last season, which is that I do think they kind of punish him for the rest of the series. They just beat up on him a lot. I'm not okay with that. Like, it surprises me how much that bothers me, actually. But in a way, though, I think that some of that is necessary, because in order for him to really make this transition into not being a despicable human that he does, I think taking away the pedestal is important for his own growth.
Yeah.
Like, he needs some of those things to be stripped away so he can see, like, how they don't really amount to much, that they are a lot, not all of them, but a lot of them are superficial. Now, to your point about him giving up, I would have loved for you to have said that to Steve. Like, I would have loved for you to have been Steve's teacher. It's like, for someone to have said that to him. Because also, sidebar, I don't blame Nancy necessarily, but I find that I really don't like the way she says calm down. Calm down. It's very like, you're making a big deal out of nothing. And that's not me blaming like Natalia Dyer's performance. I think that's probably exactly what's supposed to be happening.
Yeah.
At the same time, I don't totally hear Steve giving up. In a way, I think it's him knowing his limits. I think him going like, I'm behind. I'm literally finishing my school year. I think he's at least trying to think rationally. Like, it's a bit self-deprecating at first, but I think it shifts pretty quickly. I think he's kind of like, look, me not being a super great student, okay, but also like, I could make a good life for myself. The pessimistic part is the like, that's where I'm going to end up anyway. I don't really like, clearly this is a dead end road. But him going like, okay, well, given that that's probably what's going to happen, and I probably won't be able to achieve this whole college goal thing. And also then I get to see you more. I know I've heard some people read that as like a little creepy. I don't. I see it as very sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I stand by the feeling that he's giving up. I also think that we're coming at this from a very 2021 perspective where you have to go to college. At this point, it's almost like, you know, if you want to be like a manager at Target, you have to go to college, which is its own thing.
While that is true, we're seeing a massive rise in the trades, the trade schools. So it's like, it's interesting how hearing him say that, I was like, that actually feels like a very like right now sentiment. Like, I feel like we didn't see that a lot when we were in high school. We saw the whole go to college.
Yeah.
And there is still a lot of that. But I think now it's almost like we're starting to pull back from that. Like, it's like, hey, no, like if you can get a job as a plumber, like that's a secure job. It pays well. just having those things that he talks about. I'm like, that's some good shit he's talking about.
Yeah, it's a balance there. And I do think that a lot of people in the 80s went straight into a job rather than going on to college. So I am a very like education person, whatever that looks like for you, whether that's trade school or, but I definitely don't see Steve saying like, oh, I could stick around and take care of you as creepy. I mean, I think that's some Puritan bullshit. Like they're in a committed relationship.
Yeah, it was just one of those things like I never really thought about. Yeah. And then someone said that and I went, is it creepy? Well,
no.
Even if it is, I don't see it that way. And I will say that like I have a hard time remembering what my view of it was when I watched it the first time. I think there was a little bit of an eye roll like, oh, they're still together. Like I said, wow, that feels ham-fisted for us to believe that he's stupid. But as you said, this is also when Billy and Max arrive. Curious, too, that Billy is the one who gets the emphasis of an entrance, the music kind of matching him, even though I would argue that Max is the one who ends up being more prevalent. But she's sort of just an aside to Billy's music.
Yeah, I think that was very, very intentional. Yeah. And I actually think it was effective in a subtle way because, again, he's got, the sexy car, which he doesn't deserve. I would just like to have that on record. Gets all the girls staring at him. It creates a persona, right? The bad boy, the mysterious boy, the bad but sexy boy. But as soon as Max gets out of the car, you see her face. You see that he's not acknowledging her in any way. She clearly wants nothing to do with him. She looks like uncomfortable and upset. I love that song and I love that car, but like if you come into my life being like, look at me, I'm the sex, I'm gonna be like, oh God, go away. So like all of my attention immediately shifts to Max and I'm like, yo, is he bothering you? So like in the same way that Steve's kind of like, I'm the big man on campus got undercut by Billy's arrival gets undercut by Max.
Well, it's interesting, though, because actually what interrupts the scene with Steve and Nancy is right after they exchange I love yous.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
One of my disappointments in season 3, though not in a way that I'm actively angry about, just kind of bummed, is not getting to see Nancy and Steve interact more as exes. What is that dynamic like? That's something I'm hoping we get to see more of in season 4. The other thing is that his entrance is a Terminator reference. Like when his foot comes out of the car, like it's one big Terminator reference, which is actually some interesting foreshadowing considering that he turns out to be a bit of a baddie. And the girls checking him out feels like a curious inversion of like the expected trope, not unlike what we see in season 3 when they doubled down on it. I've always kind of wondered though, who is Billy, who or what is Billy looking at? Like the eye lines are all weird.
He's not looking at anybody. He's making sure everybody's looking at him.
So it is a staring into the middle distance. Just like,
I've got dramatic. A cigarette. Yeah. Now I don't.
Yeah.
Watch me walk away.
Yeah. And Max is introduced to the class. So I want your opinion on this.
Okay.
Because why do teachers do this?
Oh, well, okay. So, all of my teaching experience is like at minimum college level and it's usually at graduate level. So like I don't have too much experience with actually teaching K through 12 students. But the reason is to be welcoming. It's to be like, okay, this is what the new kid's name is. This is where they're from. To acknowledge like the presence of this new person in the hope that the other kids will be like, oh, California, huh? Cool. Hey, Max. And it's fine for like most kids. But if a kid is, severely introverted, it can feel very much like, being put on the spot.
And to be fair, Mr. Clark does respect her request to be called Max. Like she's like, it's Max. And he goes, cool. Okay, Max. Well, welcome aboard. You know, Mr. Clark coins the phrase curiosity voyage, which Justin will use later. Followed by that, we meet Bob, as played by Sean Astin, when he visits Joyce at work. And I thought it was cute. She is working on Will's Ghostbuster costume. These two are so cute. I like them.
Yeah.
Bob is actively aware of Jonathan and wanting to be part of the family dynamic. The first time that I watched this season, I was instantly worried that Bob was too good to be true. But I thought that either here or in chapter 2, he was going to turn out to be like working for the lab or something, or like he was a reporter, something like that. I never thought he was like trying to harm them physically or anything, but I was like, something doesn't feel like this feels too good to be true.
Yeah. I think I kind of worried that he was too good to be true. But my, like, fear turned out to be what actually happened. I was like, they're going to set him up and he's going to be the sacrificial lamb. And I'm not cool with that. In that scene where they're like making out in the storeroom, like it's 90% of it is very sweet. And like I was kind of gut checking myself as we were watching it today. And I found myself like smiling, like every time she was like giggling, like, no, I have to go back to work. And, you know, I don't like that he says like, oh, you didn't even know who I was in high school. I'm like, how long have you been out of high school? Like, you make me feel like a teenager is cute. And I'm sure it's true. But I don't think we need to like, I don't know, like, why would you go there? I don't know.
Hopper investigates the rotten pumpkin patch while Meryl, played by Fenton Lawless, accuses nice old Eugene of vandalizing the fields.
I mean, I would like to know what the hell you can pour in a pumpkin.
Yeah, they're rotten.
Yeah.
Like, how do you do that? I don't know. And maybe there's a way. I don't know. I mean, Hopper kind of goes there when he's like, so you think nice old Eugene came out and did this in one night?
Yeah.
And so Hopper stalks through the cornfield, only to be spooked by a stray crow.
Who was trying to warn him.
And then this is followed up by the scene between Jonathan and Nancy, where she tries to persuade him to come to the Halloween party, and which we talked about a little bit.
Yeah. I don't like Kurt Vonnegut. I'm kidding. I don't know if I've even read the whole way through a Kurt Vonnegut novel. But Vonnegut's one of those names of like the authors that quote unquote intellectual people like.
Yeah.
So my knee-jerk reaction to that was, did you pick Vonnegut because it sounds smart, or did you pick Vonnegut because he actually likes Vonnegut?
I think it's possible that it's both. I mean,
Yeah.
Jonathan as a character does strike me as the kind of person who would like Vonnegut.
At least it's not Ayn Rand.
I mean, because I was thinking, like, well, is there another name I would think would work better for Jonathan? And, like, no, nothing comes to
Steinbeck,
mind.
maybe, although I
don't like Steinbeck, personally.
No, me neither. Anyway.
And then Steve sneaks up on her. Mm-hmm. And I mean, even though I would certainly not want someone to sneak up on me like that, I do think that it does translate as being very sweet between them. Mm-hmm. But it's also hella rude. I mean, it completely excludes Jonathan.
Yeah. I also don't like being snuck up on, but if I like saw that he was coming and he like picked me up and was like, hey, I missed you. I haven't seen you in an hour. Ha ha ha. And didn't actually mean it like, no, I missed you.
Yeah.
Like, it was, like being silly, like all of that is very cute.
Yes.
But I wouldn't want somebody to be acting like that if he saw that I was like talking to one of my friends.
I think it was probably just more careless on Steve's part, but it's also, but it's hard not to be like, but it is Jonathan that she's talking to.
There's a little bit of
performative
contesting of the pissing going on.
Well, it continues to be, I mean, like, because one thing I always wondered about is, like, because he's wearing the sunglasses for the first half of that exchange, like, I wonder if he actually, like, looks over at Jonathan, like, if there's almost, like, wasn't that funny? But you can't tell because you can't see his eyes.
I don't think he's paying much attention.
Well, I mean, I would love to have that confirmed,
yeah,
like, you know, by his eye line, but we don't know.
Don't know.
Yeah. Speaking of sneaking up on, the boys spy on Max.
God, they're so ham-fisted.
Mike is unconvinced that she's Madmax and doubts that she's awesome, pointing out that they haven't even spoken to her, which I both agree and disagree with Mike at the same time. When he says the thing about, like, you haven't even talked to her, you don't even know her. I'm like, you're not wrong about that part. And then when she drops the note in the trash, which tells them to stop spying on her, we get Dustin's awesome, well, shit. But I like that Mike actually smiles in a way that makes me think he's impressed with Max in spite of himself.
Yeah.
Or maybe he's just amused that they're being called out. Either way, I like it.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know if that was direction or if that was Wolfhard making a choice.
Yeah.
And of course, that scene is interrupted when the principal summons Will. It indicates that while they're going on with their lives, all is not totally normal. You know, the shadow of the past year is still weighing on Will, and therefore all of them. And it's done in this it feels very organic to me. Mm-hmm. Will and Joyce in the car.
I was really, really kind of touched by the fact that Will told Joyce what he saw instead of the way he did with Mike, just being like, oh no, you know, we're all good. Everything's fine. You know, I liked that. And it also contrasts with, like, you know, things begin happening with Will and he doesn't tell Joyce what's going on and is in many ways not able to.
Hopper is waiting for them at the lab. They go in and they hook Will up to the computer. And even though I'm gonna guess that this sequence is probably meant to be inspired by other things, it really gave me Flight of the Navigator vibes. I don't know if that's what they were going for, but that's really what it made me think of for anyone who's seen Flight of the Navigator. I'm referring to the whole sequence where David is hooked up to machines, very much like this. It's a great little movie. Came out in 86. But like I said, I don't think that's what they're going for. But at the same time, Mike's shirt is also very similar to the shirt that David wears in Flight of the Navigator. So who knows? I mean, I know eventually it feels like they go very Exorcist with Will, with a lot of but eventually down the road. But don't know. Have you seen Flight of the Navigator?
I am not blessed to say that I have seen The Exorcist, but I have not seen Flight of the Navigator. Just to let you know how I feel about about both films.
Yeah.
The Exorcist is a whole episode unto itself. So yeah, I don't like it. It is giving me like, this reminds me of something vibes. Like the only answer that I can think of is E.T., but I don't.
Oh yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair, but I feel like there's a better one. There's a better reference out there. But I think what took up all of my attention, not even necessarily just the first time, but honestly, like the first couple of times going through this season when I watched that scene, was just trying to figure Owens out. Like, what's his deal? What's his motivation? Where's he coming from? Is he being sincere? Does he actually care about Will? Who does he work for? All of that. Like, that's what gets all of my focus. And like, how much have they actually told him? Because, he calls Hopper Pops. Does he actually think that Hopper is Will's biological father?
I doubt it.
Why is he calling him Pops? What is your deal, sir?
I do love the immediate contrast to Brenner.
Yes.
Though, like, I mean, this guy almost instantly doesn't feel evil. Even though they're still spying on him, they're still watching the video feed, but like the way it's shot, the lighting, the score, it just doesn't translate as like overtly evil the way that it did last season.
They've got observation cameras on him in the observation room.
Exactly.
Not at home or whatever.
Yeah. When Dr. Owens comes in, played by Paul Reiser, it's just a very like straight on, medium wide. There's no dynamic music. A lot of it is the way he plays the part, but also it's like, it's not, he's not shot super high in the frame. Like they didn't low angle it. He's not Brenner. And I like that.
Yeah.
I actually enjoy the kind of confounded reaction that I had. Like Bob, like I didn't want to trust him. Mm-hmm. It made me apprehensive and anxious, but like in the right way, I feel. Because apparently, I don't know, maybe some people didn't like the contrast. They wanted someone more like Brenner, but I like that it was like a left turn, that it wasn't the same thing over again.
Yeah.
I also think that part of the reason I like it is this change from Brenner is that it also feels like a progression. Mm-hmm. It's not even just that it's not more of the same. It actually feels like they're moving. There's forward movement in the development of what the lab is, who is running it. Mm-hmm. Again, it prompts these questions that I think are good questions to have.
Tell us what a medium wide is.
Medium wide shot. So it's not like a, super, super duper wide shot. 2/3 of the person is in the frame. I noticed too in the sound design, there's the same keening sort of sound as under this scene that was under Hopper's scene in the cornfield. So again, like just very mildly, very distantly making some connections there. And then Will waits in the hall while Joyce and Hopper talk to Owens, and he warns him about the anniversary effect. And I don't know if it's intentional, but I noticed that the lighting is very different between the shot of Owens and the shot of Hopper and Joyce. They are lit very warmly from the light inside the room. He's lit from the natural light from the window. So his side of it is very cool tones, and they are very warm. I don't know if that means anything, but I noticed it. He tells them, again, setting up these questions and not knowing where we're going, like, he tells them that, quote, those people from last year are gone. And like you and I think are probably in very much agreement. Like, when he asked for their trust, that Joyce and Hopper are like, seriously?
Yeah.
But in hindsight, I actually, I don't know, maybe I'm way off here, but I don't think that Owens is an evil person, and I don't think he was deliberately trying to screw them over.
No.
The lab itself, not just Owens, like the lab as a presence is very different. It's even though Owens in this scene is shot with a cooler light, overall, color temperature of the whole lab is warmer. The lighting isn't as like stark and high contrasty. The scenes are just a little brighter overall. Like, not entirely. I mean, that shot when you see them watching the video feed, it's contrasty and ominous, but not in the same way. It just doesn't have that same, I don't know. It feels a little milder.
Yeah.
More exposed. And there's a double meaning in that. It's just a little less mysterious. And I think that's effective in a good way. Even one step further, when Owens goes down into the basement and goes up, right up to the guy doing the field walk, it's completely different from the vibe we got from Brenner, who watched from way up on high.
Yes. Yeah. Owens walks up to the flamethrower man and says like, it looks like it's going to be another hot one. And the guy responds with, never gets old, sir. And like right in that line, what that made me kind of realize was, oh yeah, unlike just tossing human after human at the problem and then like watching them die in the first season, they have a guy that like does this every day and they have developed a rapport. And so it shows you that whatever's going on, at least Owens is not as casual with human life.
Mm-hmm. We get a look at the gate, which looks bigger and more severe than last season, but even here we don't get the full view of it.
Yeah.
And it shrieks and writhes when it's burned, like all the vines and stuff. Meanwhile, at the arcade, Dustin and Lucas spy, waiting for Max. Billy drops her off, and the two of them yell at each other indistinctly. How does this stack up with their later scenes where Billy, like, way overpowers her?
Relationships, like the one that the two of them have a kind of, like, escalation, She will scream at him, and he will scream at her. Maybe she has an instinct that he won't actually try to hurt her because they're in public and people are watching.
Oh, that's true.
It's a deeply dysfunctional relationship. And I think it kind of checks out that, like, if she's afraid of him when they're in private, that she would be sassy with him in public because those defiant emotions have to go somewhere,
I will take this opportunity to say that I greatly enjoyed the Stranger Things companion novel, Runaway Max. I'm currently, as of this recording, I'm in the middle of reading Rebel Robin. But I really enjoyed the one on Max because it doesn't really, it overlaps with this season, but it doesn't, it's more, the main point of it is to really get Max's backstory. To the point where I actually wish that they had, the author had just focused on that and didn't really spend time in Hawkins at all, but highly recommend it. It's very good. Dinner at the Wheelers. Karen demands that Mike give up 2 boxes of toys, and she calls him out for his troublemaking behavior. It's almost like he's dealing with something and lashing out. It's almost a passing blink and you'll miss it, but it's like they are implying that Mike is he's lashing out because he's having a hard time, and the parents not fully understanding why, but clearly he's not all is well with your child. So like
they don't know about 11, but they know what happened, at least in some part, with Will. They know that he disappeared. They know how traumatized Mike was about that, and even though Will is back, that doesn't take away the trauma that he went through. Again, this is also a very 21st century perspective, but I'm like, I don't think that punishment is actually the route here. I think all these kids should really be in therapy. I can very, very easily see, just in my memories and, from talking to people who were adults in the 80s, it's like, okay, well, the problem is solved. So the problem is solved.
Yeah. I do love, though, Ted's line about, well, if your friend told you to jump off a cliff, would you do it? I never put it together until very recently, but just like Dustin told him not to, but he quite literally jumped off a cliff. So I love Mike's whole like face journey in response to that. It's great. It's such a commonly used go-to, or at least it was when I was growing up. So then, I don't know, just the irony. It's great. Dinner at the Hollands. Nancy asks about the for sale sign, and the Hollands tell the kids about hiring Murray. Steve thinks it's great. Nancy's not so sure. And I thought that was interesting, too, because I've always read that as Steve's a little just, again, being a little obtuse about the whole thing. But as far as he knows, she's just still missing. But Nancy knows that she's dead.
Yeah.
So in a way, his reaction is like, no, well, that is great, isn't it? Like,
yeah, but I'm not, why wouldn't, here's a question that I don't no, I think this may very well be another thing we're not meant to worry our pretty heads about. But why wouldn't Nancy tell Steve that Barb's dead?
That's true, because he at this point he does know about...
He knows about the Demogorgon.
Right. So he probably does know.
No. I think the implication there is very much that he doesn't know. Because, like, Steve can be a little dense, but that's another level.
So if that was their implication, then, like, if they were just trying to imply that he's just that stupid, then shame on the writing.
Yeah, no.
Because that's
wild.
That's horrible if that's what they were going for.
No, I think they're just, like, they're implying that Nancy never told him what happened to Barb, but like, why? I see no reason for her to have kept that from him. He knows about the Demogorgon. So he's pretty up to date on everything. I definitely think through the acting and all of that he just doesn't know what's going on. I don't see any textual reason for doing that. Honestly, I think it's a plot hole.
Probably. I have to say, I'm surprised at how much I bristle at the idea of Hopper being called lazy.
I think if I had a daughter who went missing and, almost a year had gone by and the official story was, oh, she must have just run off, I would probably be calling him lazy too.
Yeah, no, I completely get that that's what their perspective is. It's just funny because having the insider knowledge that do, we know that, like, that's probably the last thing that Hopper as a person actually is.
Yeah.
Like, I just think it's just a funny juxtaposition of, like, well, when you really know someone. Mm-hmm. Hopper did kind of wake up last season.
Yeah.
So I can understand why a lot of people, not just the Hollands, might feel that way. That's what Lonnie implied. He was like, Hopper's not still chief, is he?
Yeah.
Both parents are sure, though, that Murray will lead them to Barb and the pieces will click into place to what Hopper said earlier. And it's awkward for both of them, I think, for both Nancy and Steve. But she has to excuse herself when she's in the bathroom, like, having her feelings about it all privately. Again, which implies that she can't rely on Steve for that. Which maybe implies, based on what your observation, maybe, like, if Steve doesn't know, because Jonathan was in the room with her when that truth came out. Mm-hmm. So that could be another layer. Even if Steve does know about it, it's like Jonathan was part of that. Mm-hmm. So
shared trauma.
Mm-hmm. This is the first use of the musical track Eulogy, which they use later for Bob as well. And it's a really beautiful piece of music. It's really, really heart-wrenching. And that track carries over into a scene in which Mike goes through his toys. But, when he gets out the Millennium Falcon, the track switches to 11's theme. It occurred to me only this time that it's both of the Wheeler children that have grief primarily on their mind. Like, they both lost someone, which I'd never thought about before. Because I don't usually think that Nancy and Mike have a lot in common, but this is something that they are both dealing with in very different ways for very different reasons. And even though, yes, technically, like with Will, 11 does return, like you said, it doesn't take away the trauma of watching her sacrifice herself. It doesn't take away the trauma that he's dealing with. I know that we talked a little bit last season about how they kind of refer to this season as emo Mike. But I said in our very last episode, where we talked about the comparisons between Order of the Phoenix and season 2 of Stranger Things, I think this is another example. I remember when Order of the Phoenix first was published, there was a lot of like, oh, Harry's so emo in this one. Mm-hmm. And I do think that, again, I think the recognition of PTSD has come a long way since that book was first published. And I think the opinion of the way that Harry behaves in that novel is very different now than it was originally. A lot of people see that that's what's happening. And I hope that continues to be true of this season as well, that Mike is dealing with some pretty intense grief and he has no way to process it because his other friends aren't even dealing with it on the same level that he is. He has to be supportive for what Will is going through. For whatever reason, he and Nancy just don't have a connection, so they can't like help each other. I don't know. I think that this is actually a really beautiful portrayal of what would happen to this kid. I think it would manifest this way because he has nowhere to deal with it otherwise. Other than to try to reach out to Elle through the walkie-talkie, and it is absolutely her voice the first time you hear his name, and then the second time it's Dustin's voice. He shuts that down. He's like, no, I'm not interested in anything to do with Max. We get another scene between Will and Jonathan, and it's not as good. I would say it's not quite at the same level of the should I stay or should I go scene from last season, but I mean, that scene was pretty exceptional.
Yeah.
And this one is really, really sweet. I like it because it continues to, especially here in the first episode, it continues to really do a lot of quiet character work and really like setting the grounding for where these characters are going to go from this point forward. And I think that's kind of something I was talking about in our last episode about how it does have the slower pace. And I think that this bothers some people for whatever reason, but we really enjoy it. I think there's a lot of value in this. I mean, I personally love that Jonathan doesn't stick to the no approach and try to talk Will out of how he's feeling. You know, that's always a pretty difficult approach to try to make work when someone is upset. So instead, Jonathan just validates Will's feelings and doesn't try to pretend that what he's saying isn't true. And then he works through that sentiment to show how maybe it can be okay in spite of what's going on. And there's even this really fantastic camera move where the camera crosses over the 180-degree line when Jonathan changes his tactic. It's this really nice, subtle touch. And in case you don't know, the 180-degree line is whenever you have a conversation between two people on film, 180-degree line, like a straight line between the two of them. You know, you imagine that line between the two of them, and then wherever you put the camera, it can't cross over that line, so that it doesn't look like the characters are both looking at the same direction, so that it looks like they're facing each other. And so when Jonathan goes, okay, yeah, you are a freak, the camera actually moves behind Will so that then Jonathan is looking, so then his eye line changes from looking one direction to the other. And then when it switches to Will's angle, the camera has moved to the respective side so that they are still looking, you know, at each other, towards one another. It's reflective of Jonathan like changing tactic.
Yeah, so it's a perspective shift.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
On that note, shout out to Tim Ives, the cinematographer, the DP for this episode. And also Bob Gorlick, camera A operator, and Jeff Crumley, camera B operator, because I don't know who shot that scene, but chances are it was one of them.
Yeah.
So,
and it was brilliant.
It was great. And I like that Will defends Kenny Rogers. Like some people like Kenny Rogers, which sort of metaphorically ends up being a defense for Bob.
Yeah.
Which I like. And the Byers and Bob watch Mr. Mom, and Jonathan's bored. But Will seems to be enjoying it.
Will's enjoying his popcorn.
True, but
which
like,
I appreciate. Yeah. You know, I sympathize. And
the phone rings, which startles Joyce and Jonathan, but Bob, who probably doesn't get why they're freaking out, still offers reassurance. And I don't know, is this trying to show Joyce's PTSD from last year?
I would say so, yeah.
You know? I mean, because it made me wonder, like, so is this the reaction that she has every time the phone rings?
We kind of talked about that, and I said, I wonder if it's more of a thing of, this is the reaction she has when the phone rings late at night, or because Bob goes out of his way to say, let it go, it's probably just a prank call. I wonder if they're getting a lot of prank calls, you know, because of Will having disappeared and people having opinions about it.
Curiously, though, the alarms are going off at the lab.
What could it be?
What could it be? We kind of bounce back and forth. We go from the Byers to the lab and then back to the Byers again, because Will makes a middle-of-the-night bathroom trip, has another episode. Goosebumps appear on the back of his neck, so that's the first incident of that. And I think at the time, the goosebumps were to indicate the cold and not so much Will's sense of the mind flare, but I mean, I could be wrong.
I mean, I think it was probably like cold and fear.
So I want to track that moving forward to see like, kind of like the idea of Eleven's battery being low. I want to see like how and when that shows up, you know, as we go. And this is when we get our first glimpse of the mind flare.
Yeah. Fuck him in particular.
I'm still not, this may sound odd, but I'm still not totally sure why Will is having these episodes. Like, if we're going off the theory that he puked up Dart in the end of the Upside Down, then is that his connection The Mind Flayer hasn't gotten a hold of him yet. And then that made me think, well, so is this like kind of the Fey food thing? You know, your Fey food theory, the whole closer you get to the supernatural thing, the more the supernatural thing can affect you. Is that kind of that going on?
Yeah.
Like, that's a question. That's another question I would have for the Duffers. Like, so what actually is officially happening here? Why is this happening?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think the assumption that I had was kind of the Fey food thing, in that Will is the person who has spent the most time in the Upside Down and lived to tell about it. Elle has been there, but not for any great length of time. Joyce and Hopper have been there, but not for any great length of time. But like Will was actually there for a while. So I feel like the Upside Down or the Mind Flayer or whatever recognizes him.
Either way.
It's creepy as shit.
Well, and just already my heart just aches for Will.
Yeah, I am very protective of Will, probably for like the rest of my life. Like anytime I see Noah Schnapp, even though he's, you know, like 8 feet tall and, you know, could probably like bench press 2 of me at this point. Like, you know, I'm just going to be like, my baby, nobody touch my baby.
Yeah. Know? Well, considering how much you empathize with Joyce.
Yes.
That's not surprising.
Yeah.
And then in our last sequence of the episode, Hopper drives out to his cabin, stepping over a trap, making a special knock on the door. Mm-hmm. And surprise! Elle is here! Woo! With Ripley's hair.
I know, she looks so adorable. And she's pissed because he's late. Mm-hmm. He did not signal.
And then in this scene, they like really, really establish and foreshadow Hopper's lack of reliability, or at least his punctuality. You know, and his like, I'll be more careful next time. You know.
Yeah.
Which feels a little chilling, knowing what's going to happen between the two of them.
Yeah. Then
they eat dinner, a TV dinner, and the episode ends.
Yeah.
And season 2 is officially off and running. So final wrap-up thoughts.
This was a really great Will episode. I mean, of course, that's necessary because he's so central to the arc of the second season. But I just really appreciated, like, you know, getting to spend so much time with him. And he doesn't say much throughout the entire episode, but we really spend a lot of time just like trying to understand what he's feeling and what he's going through and situating him in his new context and seeing him with his friends and seeing how much comfort that brings him and seeing how close he still is with Joyce and Jonathan. And there's a lot of like establishing, but also destabilizing at the same time, because we're finding out that, you know, not all is well and he's having these episodes and so on.
The fact that we're getting this first episode is so much about Will. And there's so much emphasis on Will. It's like we didn't get him for most of the last season. So we didn't get to spend time with him. So the fact that they're in this first episode, they're leaning very much into the fact that he is here and we're getting to spend this time with him. I never thought of that until you just pointed that out. And that's a really cool aspect of this episode. Mm-hmm. That's rad. Yeah.
I also really appreciated, the way that they talk about PTSD and Owen saying like, and we're still learning, because even now in 2021, we are absolutely still learning about PTSD. I have never, ever heard of the anniversary effect. I don't know if you have. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. I absolutely think that like on anniversaries of traumatic or upsetting occasions, you can experience a heightened sense of any PTSD that you have. I've just never heard that term.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've never heard the term either, but I definitely have experienced it.
Yeah, and that conversation where he's saying, don't treat him any differently, blah, blah, blah. And then Joyce says, so we're supposed to just act like it's not happening. And he says, it's counterintuitive, but yeah. I kind of struggle with that exchange. That's not actually the right response for real life. If you know someone or are close to someone who is struggling with PTSD, you want to treat them like they are a person. You want to create stability as much as you can. You don't want to treat them like they're made of glass. You want to treat them like they are a person, because the goal with when you're struggling with PTSD is to return to life, to return to feeling like it's safe to live. And so you want to treat Will in this situation like it's safe to live. It's okay to have these big reactions. It's okay to be affected by your experience, but it's safe to live. Acting like everything's okay, nothing is even going on, nothing's happening, is not going to help. It's just going to further isolate him. It's just going to make him feel like he can't talk about it and so on.
That's kind of, in a way, what Will even says. He says, stop treating me like I'm a baby, like I'm made of glass, like I'm going to break, essentially.
Yeah. And so I struggle a little bit with that. And this is not me complaining about the writing. It's not me complaining about the performance. It's me being really interested in PTSD and not knowing if this is a thing where they intentionally wrote it that way because this is the way they used to treat PTSD in the 80s, if they intentionally wrote it that way because they want us to question Owens' motives, if the writers don't really know too much about PTSD and they're kind of amalgamating stuff they read on Wikipedia. I'm not even being mean. It's a very short scene. It's fine, but it is a little bit frustrating because it's so close to really being true, but it's not true.
I think there's probably some semblance of like bits and pieces of all of that in there because what I thought you were going to say was like if they're just, regardless of what they knew or didn't know or whatever, they're trying to just sow the seeds for the conflict that will happen. Yeah. Yeah, it's very insightful. On first watch, I wasn't really all that swept up in anything, right away, but I do remember that it felt more like I was settling in for a very different experience overall. And while it sounds like this was not shared by many other viewers, which is unfortunate, even this early in Volume 2, I liked then and I like now that the show doesn't shy away from that trauma that came before. Like with the trailer, this episode sets the tone right away. It establishes what to expect in episodes to follow and what one can expect to get from this series, the series as a whole. And not that there won't be any surprises ahead, of course. I mean, I would say that, for good or ill, Stranger Things is actually pretty good about that across the board. But looking at this episode in particular from a broader perspective, it's clear to see that they were clear about what they set out to do this go-round. I mean, at least it certainly seems that way to me, and I at least appreciate the result. Yeah. I also really appreciate that across the second and third seasons, the characters, the new characters, don't automatically equate to baddies or red shirts. In this episode alone, I mean, because we do have a red shirt and a baddie, but
we also have Max.
Well, I mean, collectively in this episode, we get Collie, Mrs. Henderson, or Dustin's mom, Keith, Murray, Billy, Max, Bob, Meryl, Dr. Owens, and the Hollands. That's a lot of new characters. And, like I said, some of them do turn out to be baddies and some don't make it to season 3, let alone season 4. But that doesn't go for all of them. Yeah. And I think that's really refreshing. It helps make the show as a whole, again, feel a little less predictable. Yeah. By the end of the episode, I was not thinking about the opening. You have that amazing kickoff, but by the time you get to the end of this episode, you're really very much reinvested in Hawkins. You're reinvested in these characters. I don't remember having the same, like, oh my God, I have to watch the next episode right away. But I do remember feeling like I very much am invested again.
Oh yeah, like I was 100% on board. I don't remember if I cheated and then continued watching on, but I definitely wanted to.
So then, with that's going to conclude our contemplation on Chapter 1, Madmax. Thank you for listening. Comments, questions, thoughts, join the conversation. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Links will be in the show notes. And if you've been enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving us a review. Coffee and Contemplation is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and lots more.
Everywhere podcasts are sold for free. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you next time.
Over and out. Spooked by a stray crow.
Who was trying to warn him. I like crows.
I do too, especially when they come in 6.
How did I not see that coming?
I don't know. I'm like, you set me up perfectly.
I did. I laid that one right up for you.
Hashtag 6 of crows.
From our friend Bucky. Starbucks. I call Starbucks Bucky's at every opportunity now just because it amuses me.
Yeah.
Also, hi, Neville.